Well, hello everybody, and thank you for joining me for this online presentation all about influence. Now, this presentation is based roughly around the work of Dr. Robert Cialdini, who's a professor of psychology at Arizona University in the States, and he's considered to be one of the world's foremost experts in influence. Now, what I will say up front is that there is a fine line between influence and manipulation. And according to my other half, I am absolutely masterful when it comes to manipulating people to get them to do things that they don't necessarily want to do, but I get them to do it and they think that they actually did want to do it. How I do that, I have no idea, but perhaps that will become apparent as we go through this presentation. Now, the difference for me between influence and manipulation is just one of intent. For me, influence is something that comes from good intent and might actually come from nothing at all. Manipulation is where somebody's actually using their powers of influence to get something that they want and something that they really want to get done, rather than something that's for the benefit of the person that they're manipulating. Now, what we're going to be discussing today will actually cover both. So the idea behind this presentation, at the end of it, I want to have you thinking like a mafia don. Granted, the mafia don I'm talking about is a fictional one, but all the same, what we're going to talk about will have you thinking about how you can actually use the influencing skills that he had to benefit what you're doing. And at the very end of the presentation, I'll be giving you a fantastic tip so that you can avoid being suckered by some of the advertising companies and some of the toy companies as we hit the run-up to Christmas. Now, there's a great quote from this chap, John C. Maxwell. And I had this fantastic image of somebody who's just walking down a street or down a road or whatever, talking away to himself or herself, thinking that there's hundreds and thousands of people behind them, only to look round and find out that actually there's nobody there. And that's kind of how I felt that this was going to turn out for me. Hopefully that's not the case, but who knows. So the agenda for this session, and this is the first part of a two-session discussion on influence, is as follows. We're going to discuss why it's important that we have a goal for whatever we do. Then we're going to look at who you should influence first. And then finally, we're going to talk about the 6 facets of influence that Dr. Cialdini has identified in his work, and how he says that we can both use them and become immune to them. And I suppose it's that second part that's actually quite important for us as we go through. So the question is, what is influence? Well, it can mean anything. I was on a course earlier on this year, and by means of a joke, I said to somebody, if at first you don't succeed, cheat. Now, I meant that as a joke, and it's just one of those things that I've been saying for years and years on end. But he took that, and he actually had that as something that influenced him. Now, I was surprised when he told me the next time that I saw him, which was about 6 weeks later, that he'd used that to help teach his son. And what he'd said to his son was, just because you don't succeed the first time doesn't mean that you're doing it the right way. Look for other ways to do things. And when I thought about it, that's perfectly true. One way of doing things is probably not all it's going to take. So it is quite a personal thing. You may be influenced by something completely different to me. But just as you're thinking about what it is and what does it mean to you, here's a few suggestions that were sent to me. And you can see just by looking at the slides, it's all about change. And that's what it is all about, change. You're looking to change somebody's behaviour, change their way of thinking. Now, as I say, sometimes you might not actually think that's what you're doing just by something innocuous, but actually you are. So I would advise that you maybe tread carefully when it comes to influence, because it's something that you can do inadvertently, and you might change somebody in a particularly good or bad way. So if you're going to influence somebody, what for? Why do you want to influence anybody? Now, I did a course, I think August last year, and I was sitting in the classroom and I could see the instructor in front of me. I could see the screen, I could hear the music, there was a bit of a beat going on to what he was playing to get us into our seats. I could see all of the fellow students in the classroom with me, and I had this apprehensive feeling. I really didn't know what was going on. And then when the music died, the instructor, John, introduced us to 4 principles. And it's only the first principle that I'm going to share with you now. And that is, know what you want. In any situation, have a clear outcome of what you want to achieve. If you don't have that clear outcome, you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to go drifting along and you're going to influence people perhaps in the wrong direction. So try and have a clear goal as to what you're doing. And if you need to do any reading around goal setting, these 2 chaps, Stephen Covey, wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and Brian Tracy, who wrote a book called Goals, they'll tell you why it's really important to have goals. In fact, in Brian Tracy's book, he quotes a group of multimillionaires who say that success is goals. Everything else is commentary. Now that's quite a telling quote. So, as I say, have a look at those 2 and see what you can make of them. But you really do need to set goals. And we'll talk later on in the presentation about why you need to set written goals. But let's just digress a little. Who's the first person that you need to influence? I read a quote in the paper today, I think it was, or online, and it was, if you look like a sheep, you'll attract wolves. So the first person that you absolutely need to be able to influence, and this is, you'll find this written by Daniel Goleman in his book Emotional Intelligence, you need to be able to manage yourself and manage your own state before you can even consider trying to influence others. Your physiology, just the way you look, the way you hold your body, the way you hold your head, that will have a great deal of influence on those around you. If you are in a room with your head down, shoulder slumped, people will see you as somebody who's not confident, and they'll walk all over you. But if you're back straight, your head's up, you're going to look confident. You're going to look like you own the room. So the first person that you need to learn how to influence is you. Now this next slide was sent to me by a colleague and a friend of mine called Sharon Young. She runs a company called Pearl Catchers. And this really is a fantastic graphical depiction of what's going on with an individual at any one time. As you can see, the little bit at the top is the bit that you can actually see. But everything else that's underneath that, everything else, that is what is going to affect how other people see you. You've heard of body language, and this is what will actually determine the body language you're projecting to other people. So as I say, influencing yourself first is key. Learn that skill and you'll be absolutely golden. So as I said earlier on, this presentation is kind of based around a chap called Robert Cialdini. He is a professor of psychology at Arizona University, and he's considered, as I said, to be the world's foremost expert on influence. And he states that there are 6 key factors that will affect how somebody is influenced. And they are, as you can see there, now where I've put people like me there, I don't mean people who do like me, I mean people who are like me. Because the people who do like me are covered in this one. Now we're only going to concentrate on 2 of those in this particular presentation. The other 2 will be looked at in the next one, so please tune in to see that one. What we're going to look at today is reciprocation, and then commitment and consistency. So reciprocation first, the favour bank. And here's where I mentioned about the Mafia Don. Now I don't know if any of you have seen the film The Godfather. Very popular film, certainly one from when I was a young man. Very, very popular. Awesome film. If you haven't seen it, I can highly recommend it. Bit violent, but in the very first scene, Marlon Brando, who's the actor, his on-screen daughter was getting married, and his character was receiving people in his study, and they were all asking him for favours. And that was fantastic. He was granting favours to everybody that asked. And the tradition was apparently that he could not refuse an accommodation from anybody on his daughter's wedding day. Wow. Isn't that awesome? But here's the deal. What he said to everybody that came in is, one day, and that day may never come, I may ask you for a favour in return. Now this is something that we're actually brought up with, reciprocation. I do you a favour, you do me a favour. I buy you a beer in the pub, you buy me a beer in the pub. And so on and so forth. And this has actually got to such a state now that it's actually almost ingrained in our psyche. And this can be used to influence people. And I'll go through shortly how some people actually use it to manipulate us into doing things. But for the time being, just think about this. If somebody does you a favour, and you're the kind of person that says, hey, you're welcome, no problems, don't mention it. Stop doing that. Ask for a favour back. And believe it or not, you can actually ask for a much, much bigger favour in return. And that feeling of needing to reciprocate will be quite strong within the person you're asking, and the chances are they'll do you something much, much bigger. Now another aspect of reciprocation is just general giving. If somebody gives me something, I generally want to give them something back in return. And certain groups have actually managed this to their benefit. I was home last week working on the computer, and there was a knock on the door, and there were two missionaries there. And the first one said to me, "Here, would you like a book that helps tell you about what's going on in the Bible? And a leaflet." Now you think, well, yeah, that happens quite a lot. When a missionary comes round, they automatically give you something, whether it's a book, a leaflet, a pamphlet, or something. And the reason they're doing that, they might not know it themselves, but the reason they're giving you something is because you will automatically feel obliged to give them something back, even if it's only your time. Now, the Hare Krishna monks in LA in the 70s stumbled across this, and they made an absolute fortune from it. Now, all of this is detailed in Cialdini's book, so you can read all about it should you wish to. But basically what they did, they went out onto the streets and they were asking for donations. And of course nobody would donate. They wouldn't donate because people were, the Krishna monks were dressed differently in these bright orange robes with shaved heads, and everybody thought they were just, well, strange. But then what the Krishnas did is they started giving books, or in other cases, small flowers, to people as a gift. And as they gave people these gifts, they then said, "Would you mind making a contribution to our order?" Because people had been given a gift, they then felt an overwhelming desire to give something back, so they contributed. Now the Krishnas built quite a massive business empire, property empire, just on this strategy. It's absolutely incredible. So think about that. How many times has somebody given you something and then you felt a need to do something back? Think about when somebody offers you a free sample in a supermarket. Now a study was done in the States, and a supermarket owner allowed people to cut their own piece of cheese from a big wheel as a free sample. In a single day, he sold £1,000 in weight of that cheese as a result of that strategy. So you can see how people cut the piece of cheese. "Oh, that's really nice. I'd like some of that. I feel obliged to buy it." And reciprocation also works nicely if you're negotiating. If somebody comes in with a completely outrageous offer, the chances are you're just going to ignore them. But if somebody comes in with something that's reasonable and you say no, and they then give you a little concession, whether that be a small win for you, the chances are you'll feel obliged, almost compelled, to offer them a concession as well. So you'll move from your initial position. As I say, this is all wired into us. Think about somebody who doesn't return favours, who doesn't maybe buy you a beer back in the pub. It doesn't take long for them to become known as somebody who you won't do a favour for, or you won't buy a drink for, because they don't reciprocate. They become persona non grata, so to speak. So it is kind of interesting that this is built in for us. Now, just as a very, very small thing, if you're asking somebody to do you a favour, if you add the word "because" in there, you're much more likely to be successful in getting them to do it for you. So as an example, here's a broom, do me a favour, go and sweep the yard. You're probably going to get met with a no. Alternatively, if you say, here's a broom, go sweep the yard because it really needs sweeping, the chances are you're going to have much more success. You're going to be more successful in getting that person to go and do that for you. just as a result of using the word because. And it doesn't necessarily matter that you've used a flimsy or a particularly good reason after the word, as long as you've used the word because. Strange, isn't it? But that's how we're wired. So moving on, the second one that we're going to consider today, and the last one in this part of the presentation, is commitment and consistency. Think about somebody who goes to Weight Watchers. What happens? Everything's done in public. You set your goal, you set your target in public. I want to weigh 12 stone by November the 30th. Now for me that would mean losing a stone at the moment, but I could always chop off an arm or something and I'd be there. But because I've made that public commitment, I am much more likely to go ahead and try and achieve that. And similarly, if I put that then in writing, I'm even more committed to it. If you've ever been into a shop and you've bought something like furniture or any big ticket purchase, and the sales staff have asked you to fill in your details and put everything on the sales order for you, the reason they're doing that is not because there may be some sort of misunderstanding and you can obviously fill in your details better. It's because that once you've put it in writing, you're much less likely to back out. How strange is that? Now, as I said at the start of the presentation, I'm going to give you one final tip. During the Christmas period, there is normally a must-have kind of toy. When I was younger, and this may show my age, it was Cabbage Patch dolls. What toy companies will do, according to the book, is they'll advertise and advertise and advertise so that there's a really specific toy that everybody wants. Now, if you've got sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, brothers or sisters, you may already know this. So there's this one toy that everybody wants. However, you can't get it in a shop for love nor money. Nobody has it. Nobody's stocking it. You may be lucky. But what happens? Because the kids are so focused on getting that toy, you promise to get it to them. And it's a promise. And you make that promise in public. So what happens is then you can't get the toy. So you buy something similar value, similar kind of toy maybe. You wrap it up. The kids are pulling it out of from under the tree at Christmas, opening it. Yay! It's fantastic. Love it. After Christmas, the toy companies start re-advertising that must-have top-ticket toy. And then what do the kids start saying? You promised you'd get me that. You promised, you gave me your word. So what do? You go out and buy it for them. That's a tactic apparently used by toy companies to get you back into the shops and buying their stuff after Christmas. So if I can say anything to you to stop you from doing that, don't promise to get something that looks like it's going to be the hot ticket toy. It's all really clever stuff. Now, if you do have any questions that you think of from this presentation, please feel free to email me. My email address is on the website, and the second part of this presentation will be available for viewing probably on Wednesday the 4th of December 2013. So, as I say, if you've got any comments or questions in the meantime, please let me have them. It's been a pleasure to have you along. I hope you've enjoyed something. And I also hope that you're going to A, be thinking a bit more like a mafia don, and B, you're not going to get suckered when it comes to those big ticket Christmas items this year. Do have a fantastic day, and influence with good intent. Don't manipulate. Thank you and goodbye.